Last night, a very curious student called me around about 10 p.m. at my study, asking what the readings of today have to do with Lent. So I said to him, young man, it is like the exams and the assignments of Father Chiso. You have to know precisely where to be to get the answers. Actually, last week we dealt with the temptation of Jesus as the opening narrative to our Lenten journey. Jesus was able to overcome his temptation for two reasons. He was driven by the Spirit to the desert where he was tempted. And then he was faithful to the word of God. Man does not live on bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Today, we encounter another temptation. So you can see the Chiso line here. From the book of Genesis. And the readings of today, put together, present us with three paradoxes, spiritual paradoxes. The first reading from the book of Genesis narrates the bizarre scenario of the request of God to Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Remember, sisters and brothers, that Isaac was the son of the promise, the fulfillment of God's own word to the childless Abraham. There are two important lessons to be drawn from this incredible story. God can never ask us to do anything for him which he himself is not willing to do for us, even abundantly. By asking Abraham to sacrifice his only son Isaac, God was revealing what he himself was willing to do for us by sending his only begotten son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. God is never unfair. God can never be outdone in generosity. Even our vows that we take, sometimes we grumble thinking that God has shortchanged us. It's not true. You have to persevere to see what awaits you in the land of the living. So the first spiritual paradox is that when God is asking for something, it is because he wants to do something even greater for us. The Lenten morale of the narrative is this. Isaac was very precious to Abraham, just as Christ is very precious to God. Yet, both of them were willing to sacrifice what was precious to them for the sake of friendship and of a greater good. Love propelled them to do this. Our Lenten observances is about sacrifices. And this is precisely where our temptations and sometimes our own downfall lies. Unfortunately, some of us give up things that we don't like anyway. Old clothes and shoes. Some even give up drinking when they hardly drink at all. The true spirit of Lent is about giving up what is really precious to us, something almost impossible to let go. Francis of Assisi calls this attitude sine proprio in his regular volata number 1. You can ask the 30 years, they know this very well because I've drilled them in this school. And then, of course, if you ask the first years and the second years, they will tell you, because Clare of Assisi in her testament calls this attitude restitution, meaning that everything that God has given us belongs to God at the end, and we must return them back to him. The second spiritual paradox is this. It is by letting go that God can fill us the more. Once our hands are full of our own ideas, our minds are full of our own ideas, there will be no place for God to give us even better things. We need to first empty our hands. So we can ask ourselves during this Lent, what is it that each one of us must truly give up for the sake of our relationship with God if we want it to work? What is it that each one of us must truly give up for our relationship with one another to work? This, my brothers and sisters, is the stuff of Lent. The Gospel narrates the story of the Transfiguration, in which God the Father reiterates the theme of listening and obeying his Son Jesus Christ, who is also his Word. A theme which begins with the baptism of Jesus. He presents Christ as his beloved Son, to whom we must listen, we must give an ear to him. But what is it that Christ is telling us to which we must listen? It is the message of the cross. This is essentially the Christian message. Christianity, my dear sisters and brothers, in other words, does not glory in the gospel of prosperity, but of the cross. Our sanctification and glorification come from the cross. Without the cross, there is no salvation. At the same time, the Transfiguration is meant to confirm the brutal reality of suffering as part of human life. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do innocent people suffer unjustly, etc.? Why do we suffer in formation? Why does love hurt so much? The questions are endless. The answer is simply that at the end of our suffering is the glorification of the human person. The fear of suffering, even though it is inherently human, is at the same time not Christian. We suffer because of many reasons, yet our suffering is transformative. It is only through our suffering that we can truly identify with Christ. We cannot be his disciples if we do not take up our cross, and it is this same cross that conquers evil and transfigures us. St. Augustine once said, when we love, we do not suffer, because if we suffer, we love the suffering. So the formation that you're going through is a purification process through the hands of the formators for a greater good. The Transfiguration, if you like, my brothers and sisters, presents us with a clearer understanding of the third and final paradox of Christian life. Far more good can come out of suffering because God has the power to make all things new. If we too are driven by the Spirit and by the Word of God, then, like Jesus, we will overcome the temptations of our life. We will overcome the temptations because of our genuine Lenten observances, which would have procured for us all the graces necessary for our state of life. In a nutshell, this is what these three readings are presenting to us. So may the Lord grant us the grace to have a spiritually enriched Lent.